Hi and welcome back to this week's Life Lessons video. It's great to be back with you all. Do you want to live a more authentic, spiritual or spiritually connected life? Well, in this week's video, we're going to be sharing with you some practical, down-to-earth and no-nonsense tips and advice for how you can live a more spiritually guided lifestyle. Welcome to our Wu Wei Wisdom Life Lessons series. In each episode, we answer your questions, reveal the powerful life lesson, and offer you lots of practical tips and advice to help you live in balance, harmony, and flow. Okay, so this is part 2 of our 2-part series on what is our spiritual nature and how do we live a spiritually guided life. I will put a link above and in the video description to part 1 if you haven't already seen it. So David, one thing we talked about last week in part 1 was the idea of Shen, our spiritual self, our higher self, that spiritual energy within us. And I know you have a great Wu Wei wisdom teaching on what we call the Shen Contract. Do you want to explain a little bit more about that?
Yes, I think one of the difficulties here is what do we call it, and I think that all of these words have different connotations. That's why I prefer to use the word Shen, because then we can give a fuller description on what we're trying to touch and what we're trying to connect with, that part of you that is non-physical, that you can't bottle and show someone. So one of the interesting teachings that I came across, and I've translated into what I call the Shen Contract. And this Shen Contract has 3 clauses, or what the Chinese call 3 blessings. So shall we run through those? Yeah. Okay. There's number 1. We've done a video on this, I think. It's what we call Yi, intention. So the first clause of this contract to be connected with your Shen is to have a clear intention, a purpose, what you're aiming towards. Now, I don't like to use the word goal or this rigidity. Targets, yeah. Exactly. I prefer the word intention because it gives you what you always call that riddle room, that you're heading towards a direction, but you have the chance to move and to adjust and to readjust and to look back. But you must keep a clear intention on what you're trying to achieve in your life. You could say your life purpose if you prefer that word. But you see, when you bring in all these new words, they all have a meaning for different people. So it's well worth, when you're listening to these and I offer you words, is drop your shoulders and take a breath and see if you can accept my word. Or you might find a better word. You might say, oh, I prefer purpose. Have a good purpose in life, David. And as long as you're not using a word that restricts you and keeps you locked in, then I'd be happy with that.
So I know, as you say, we've talked about Yi, the word Yi, or the concept, the Taoist teaching of Yi, which is spelt Y-I. We've talked about that before in our Law of Attraction video, and I will give you a link for that, and that's well worth watching. But so what you're saying, this clause essentially of this Shen contract says that it's important for us to live our life with a clear direction, a clear intention to follow our passion. But that also Absolutely. Should be, that intention, that direction, that passion needs to be or should be aligned with our spiritual nature.
Exactly. So I'm going to do the second clause now because they both kind of connect to each other. So the second clause is to live truthfully, honestly, with integrity. So you see, go back to the first one now, to have a clear intention or passion. So if you keep on saying to yourself, I'm not good enough, here comes the 3 lies, I'm not good enough, I can't cope, I'm unlovable or I'm unworthy, then doesn't that become your intention? That becomes your life journey. And you're setting the wrong intention, and you're going against your truth, honesty, and integrity. So on those first two clauses of the contract, you're breaking that spiritual that contract, that Shen contract. Because as Alex said, it's most important, again, we've done a video on this, to live your passion, to do things that you really love, that really open you up, that connects to your Shen. And this is what a passion does, living your life, following your passion.
Mm-hmm. And living, and we talked about it on so many videos, living your life in a way that gives you green light feelings. So they're positive feelings, happiness, joy, bliss, contentment, satisfaction, inner peace, inner calm. Being truthful to yourself, not lying to yourself. So when we say truth, honesty, integrity for clause 2, we mean not lying to yourself.
Or to anyone else.
Or to anyone else, i.e. following what we call the 3 lies within your core beliefs, that I'm not good enough, that I'm unlovable or unworthy, and that I can't cope. So if you have any of those 3 lies within your core beliefs, if you operate from a place where your thoughts and your self-talk and your actions are informed by those 3 lies, you are not living to your truth, honesty, and integrity.
Absolutely, and then that will affect your intention.
Well, it will infect your intention. That was a good word. Because it's then pulling apart. You can't have an authentic intention and have core beliefs and lies that are pulling you in the opposite direction.
Exactly, because you create confusion, and then guess what this does to your law of attraction? You attract confusion into your life. You say one thing, you do something else, you live behind a mask, then you have to come into the CCJing, criticizing, comparing and being judgmental. And here you are now. You're not following your path. You're stuck in some kind of carousel of despair that we call it, or hamster's wheel. And so you're not honoring your Shen. You're denying your Shen. And then this creates Shen disturbance, as we described in the first video, and that creates red light feelings. Whether you call it anxiousness, depression, guilty, whatever word you want to call it, they're telling you, they're screaming at you that you're not following your Shen and honoring yourself. Here comes a beautiful teaching. I love this teaching. Love and truth. Love and truth come from the same seed. You can't love someone if you're not truthful to them. You can't be truthful to them if you don't love them. And that applies to you and other people. So it's vitally important that you look, if you're holding those 3 lies, do you believe them? Are they your truth? They're not your truth, because if they're your truth, then give me the evidence why you're not good enough. No one has ever been able to do it. They will give me the outcome, what happens if you believe that lie. They'll give me what happens then, but that's not the evidence of why you're not good enough or can't cope or unlovable. And this is why these 2, having a clear intention, making sure, second clause, truth, honest, integrity, that you believe that intention, that you can absolutely justify it, and you have got the evidence for that intention. Now, I'm not saying that intention is going to happen at the time that you want it to happen or how you want it to happen, but whatever happens in your life, you shouldn't lose sight of that intention.
And I think as well, David, having a clear intention that is informed by your truth, as opposed to lies that the human-centered mind or the inner child gives us, that allows us, it gives us the inner strength and power to overcome adversity in daily life. So having almost like a global intention, having an inner knowing and resolve that's aligned with our authentic truth, that allows us to flow in Wu Wei more effortlessly. It allows us to deal with daily challenges and obstacles in a more Wu Wei, easy way. Not easy way, more effortless way.
Yeah, and another word I've just thought of is a mission.
Yeah.
So intention, have a clear mission about what your life stands for, what it is that you want to do. For instance, when I was ordained as a Taoist monk, I was given a mission. And my mission is to make Taoism accessible. That's all I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to convert you, I'm not trying to tell you this is right or wrong. I'm just giving you the teachings of living in balance, living in harmony, connecting to nature, being true to yourself, taking absolute full responsibility for yourself. And then I mentioned clause 3. So there's clause 3. Personal responsibility, and especially emotional responsibility. So you see how all of these 3 clauses start to connect, having a very clear intention, life mission, purpose, what you're trying to achieve, what's right for you. And that could be anything. That could be a good mother, a good father, a good business person, healthy, fit, whatever you want to do. Doing it with truth, honesty, and integrity. Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to other people. And then the third one almost follows in, having self-responsibility to do that. This is not relying on other people. This is your responsibility for your life. And those are the 3 clauses of the spiritual contract, which we'll now talk about and go in far more detail.
So for me, I think the self-responsibility clause, I almost perceive that as the foundation stone that the other 2 are then built on. Because self-responsibility for me means not blaming other people, not expecting things to turn out great if I'm not willing to put the effort in, not making excuses, not avoiding things because they are unfamiliar or challenging or difficult. Basically, it means putting in the time and effort to do the emotional self-development work, confront situations that need dealing with in an authentic way. But
there's a couple more there. Not looking externally for validation.
Yeah.
And not people-pleasing.
Yeah.
Not comparing. Not being judgmental. Not criticizing.
Yeah.
So these are when the self-responsibility or the emotional self-responsibility comes into action.
So this is all the stuff we talk about
all
in
the time.
all of our videos, because if I choose to not be emotionally self-responsible and
You're breaking the contract.
I expect other people to do things for me, I expect the universe to just send me stuff without me, even if I'm thinking negatively about myself or the universe. If I don't do the emotional self-responsibility part of the contract, then how can I be truthful to myself? How can I be honest with myself? How can I have authentic integrity, clause 2? And more importantly, how can I have a clear, authentic intention for my life without that emotional self-responsibility for my life?
So you see how all the 3 clauses kind of begin to merge. You can't have one without the other. So it's understanding how those 3 are and accepting those 3. And again, if you think one of these is wrong, please write below why you think it's wrong not to take emotional self-responsibility or responsibility. That should be very easy for you to describe why you believe it's somebody else's responsibility. But this is what I find with my clients, is they do not want to accept that, but they have no real answer, so they go around the carousel. They don't take that responsibility. And this is very important. And just a question just come into my mind. I want to answer it because I don't know where to put it in. I get asked so many times, how do you tell the difference, David? How do you tell the difference from your inner child, from your Shen? Remember, we've done this before.
The voice of your inner child.
The inner voice. To know when you're on this contract and when you're breaking the contract. Well, here's how you know. The inner child, the human-centered mind, talks at you. Exactly. Especially 3 a.m. in the morning. The Shen voice talks from you, your intuition, your gut feeling, as we talked about in the first session. So that's the difference. If you have this voice telling you what you should do, what you shouldn't do, you're not good enough, blah, 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 blah. These are all lies. You're not honoring your Shen. Your Shen will never talk like that, never speak to you like that. And you know, in that instance, you've broken your Shen contract. And then how can you love yourself if you're not truthful with yourself? And you see all the three clauses, all the three blessings then start to interact because you're going against the flow.
And I think, David, that some people watching this video may think, well, hold on a minute. I thought this video was going to be about, well, if you meditate this way for so many hours a day or so many times a week, or if you eat this way with this diet, and then this is better than that, or, very prescriptive, hard line, rigorous stretching, if you read lots of books, that will mean you're more spiritual. And actually, we don't believe in that. We believe the most spiritual thing you can do
is be yourself.
Is be your true to your authentic self, to honor your Shen by following those three clauses of the Shen contract. And as we discussed in the last video, not letting the ego, or as we call it, the human-centered mind or the inner child, be guiding your life and dragging you around and basically almost putting that blanket over the Shen so the Shen voice can't be heard. Those things, all the things we teach in all of our videos, if you can follow those, if you can watch those, they are the most spiritual things you can do for yourself. And it doesn't involve any complex practices. It doesn't involve going to China and living on top of a mountaintop. It doesn't involve following any unusual practices or any gurus, just simply honoring yourself by taking self-responsibility, by being truthful to yourself, and by living your passion and following your authentic integrity is the most powerful spiritual thing you can do for yourself.
And here comes another great test. What would you teach to your physical child? I would teach my physical child to have a good sense of intention. What is it you want to do? Whether it's going through school, whether it's going through life, whether it's what you want to do with your life journey. Think about what it is, the goal, the aim, whatever word you want to call it, the way forward, the roadmap, as some of my clients call it. So speak to your physical child about what they want for their life and their times and what they want. Wouldn't you teach them to be honest, truthful, and have integrity? And wouldn't you teach them to have a good, strong self-responsibility? See, this is not mumbo jumbo. This is common, down-to-earth sense. And when you do this, you move closer to your spirituality. When you follow all those lies, that's the mumbo jumbo. That's the, I'm not going to swear, but that's all the other stuff.
The fluff.
The fluff.
Meaningless fluff.
That's a very nice word.
That we get distracted on.
That's right. So people say to me, oh, this is spiritual mumbo jumbo. This is rubbish. No. What you're saying is rubbish. I'm not good enough. I can't cope. I'm unlovable. Rubbish. This is rubbish. Stop it. And you've got to stop it. And people say, oh, I love it when you say stop it. Stop it, because this does not make sense. Yeah. And this is denying yourself and letting yourself down. This is not something that Alex says that you have to study for years and years and years. This is down to earth common sense. Why wouldn't you want to do it? I tell you why, because this voice of this inner child screams loud and you give in to it. And this is what I hear every day. Well, it's easier. It's not easier. How could it be easier? You wouldn't even be watching this video if it was easier. You'd be having a great life going round and round the carousel of despair, beating yourself up, telling yourself lies, not living truthfully. We're offering the opposite, and it just needs you to connect to who you already are. You don't have to learn this. You don't have to go and get it from someone. This is who you are. You are awesome. You are divine. As I said last time, you are made of cosmic stardust. What more do you want than that?
But David, the inner child, the human-centered mind, is always grasping for more. So often, I know a lot of people will think, well, if I go on this retreat, if I travel around India for a year, if I read a new self-development book every week, if I do this, if I meditate every day, then that means I'm being a really good spiritual person. But if at the same time they are lying to themselves, they are not taking self-responsibility for their emotional well-being, they don't know their direction, then actually they're undoing all the other good work, even though some of those things, those lifestyle activities are, can be great for some people, really spiritually inspiring and uplifting. But if you don't do the nuts and bolts, basic Shen Contract stuff, those 3 clauses we talked about, you might as well forget everything else, because it unravels everything else, all your other good intentions. And I think for some people, the human-centered mind almost then hooks into the idea, well, if I do this, if I spend more time doing this, if I spend more time meditating, if I spend more time reading spiritual books, and then it becomes like a competition with itself, and you're comparing, well, they're doing more meditation than me, or they're going on more retreats than me. And it's almost like the human-centered mind gets too involved in things.
But the human-centered mind, as all the inner child, gets what it wants. It gets to compare. It's always looking, oh, look at them. Oh, they can meditate longer than me, as Alex says. They can be quiet longer than me. They've got a better life than me. And you're just falling back into the same trap, the illusion. And that's what it is. It's just an illusion. And you've got to break the illusion. And this is what these videos are around, to break the illusion. I can't teach you. I can't give you what you already have. You are already divine. What else do you want?
Brilliant. And I think, David, that the idea that if we are under self-responsibility, this idea of having self-compassion for ourselves, so not doing the CCJ, not doing the comparing, not doing the judging, not doing the criticizing of ourselves or other people, rather giving ourselves self-compassion, self-love, what the Taoists call Chiang. That is that's vitally important in terms of our daily lifestyle, what we do for ourselves under the banner of self-responsibility.
But that's as important for me as eating and drinking and breathing.
Yeah.
Why would you not do that? I don't understand why you wouldn't do that unless you're believing the illusion and you haven't challenged the illusion that the inner child and the human-centered mind has given you, and you're believing the lies. But then when we challenge the lies, you can't give me any evidence that they're even true. You just go along with it. And then the best thing, as I said, we did a retreat a couple of weeks ago, and the best answer that people come up with, well, it's easier. And have you ever said that to yourself? It's easier. It's easier to lie to yourself. How can that be easier? It's easier to go around on the carousel of despair. It's easier not to live, not to follow your true intention. It's easier not to connect to the law of attraction. It almost seems nonsensical when I say it. This doesn't make sense. Would you actually teach that to your physical child? It's easier to keep comparing yourself with other people. You wouldn't do that to them. Why are you doing it to yourself? This is just something that you haven't challenged. And then people say, here's something else they say to me. Well, it's a habit. It's just a habit, David. A habit is a choice set on default. You are making the choice. Don't put it like you're somehow out of your control and it's a habit and you have no control over it. You can change it. Strip it apart, see why you're doing it, take responsibility. Here's the Shen Contract, and then say, I'm doing it because of this. I'm doing it because I don't think I'm good enough. Then my question would be, please prove to me you're not good enough. No one's been able to do it.
So, David, in a normal day, we're saying, have that sense of mindfulness about what you do, have that sense of self-responsibility for your thoughts, your thinking, your beliefs.
Let it become your filter.
Let it become your filter, and let yourself be guided by that clear, authentic intention. And we've done lots of videos on all of these topics. But if I say to you, well, I'm looking for some sort of inspiration I want to be inspired by something that's going to click me into my spirituality or help me connect back to my spirituality. In the last video, we talked about in philosophical Taoism, there's no gods, there's no gurus, the wisdom is within you. Now, I know you've already said it's very important to connect back to that Shen voice, which, and use that, whether you want to call it your intuition, your inner voice, your higher self, to connect back to that every day, whenever you need to, for guidance. We've done a video on how you can do that, and I will put a link to that. But also the Taoists talk a lot about nature and being inspired by nature and being connected to nature. Do you want to explain that a little bit more?
Well, I can remember a Taoist monk once saying to me, there is no mysteries in the universe. Just look out the window and watch how nature works. Watch how trees grow, sky moves, water flows. They're always talking about water and the water cycle. And the water cycle is a great example of life, really, coming down the mountain, going to the sea, going back round, and that's how we are. So when you're ever stuck, so for instance, when have you ever thought of a bird standing on the edge of the nest and saying, am I good enough to fly? Could I cope with it?
Yeah.
They just do it. And we have a dog, and we often say, our dog's called Lily, and we often say, what would Lily do?
Yeah, that's true.
Because she just gets on with it.
She doesn't, like all of nature, it doesn't hold on to things.
Exactly.
It doesn't have expectations.
It just
flows. Just trusts. It just does what it does, and it just trusts that things will work out. It hasn't got an intelligence per se when we're talking about plants, rivers and trees, but there is a natural flowing transformation and that things will just click into place. But when we don't follow nature, so when we want to grasp things, when we want to manipulate things, when we want to control things, when we want known outcomes, when we think about the future too much or ruminate on the past too much, they are all things that nature does not do, and which also get us into trouble.
Well, this is, isn't it? And we spoke the last time about wanting to control. Nature doesn't want to control. It adapts. It flows. This is Wu Wei, effortless effort. If you want to see this in action, as Alex says, in nature, watch those beautiful eagle-type birds that glide on the air currents. They're not worrying about the next air current. Yeah. They go with the currents. Look at fish. They don't battle against the tides and the currents. They go with the tides and the currents. And this is how we should be living. We should be inspired by nature because we are part of nature. And people talk about, well, how can I trust? How can you trust anything? You compare yourself with someone else. You're putting your trust in them. Why are you putting your trust in them? That doesn't even make sense. So if you're copying someone else or comparing yourself with someone else, what you're actually saying is, I can't take responsibility for my life, but I'm going to copy you.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you? It doesn't make any sense to me. I can't trust myself, but I can trust this stranger who lives over the road or lives next door to me. I'll trust them and follow them. It doesn't make sense.
And that lack of trust comes from self-doubt in ourselves.
Absolutely.
But when we connect back to
wanting certainty,
and 100%, and also having the green light feeling of confidence and a surety in ourselves, and that comes from connecting to Shen. Now, David, I know a question we get asked all the time on the spiritual lifestyle and being spiritually guided in our life is. So you've given us all these things: self-responsibility, authentic intention, doing the right thing by ourselves.
Listening to the inner voice rather than the loud external voice.
How do I square that with living in our Western society, in a very material world, all those things where I've got to go out and get a job. I don't like my job. You know, what do I have to, how do I square that circle?
So you use your superpower.
Okay.
What's your superpower?
Which one? My sensitivity?
Exactly. You sensitively balance the two together. Remember, we've done a video on it. Sensitivity is not a weakness. You sensitively deal with situations in your commercial career, with your family, with your friends, but you do it with truth, honesty, and integrity. You have a clear intention. You do not give up your self-responsibility to marry them or apply to them, but you do it with sensitivity. You find your flow, and that's what Wu Wei means. So if a family member or a friend is being difficult, you sensitively deal with that situation, going through the filter of your Shen contract. Truth, honesty, integrity, having a clear intention, not giving up, self-responsibility.
And I think, David, that's so right, because what we're after here, what we're advocating is Wu Wei. So in the first video, we explained how we have, us as individuals have the Shen energy, that's spiritual energy, and we also have our human energy, so our physical body and our mind, and that our life here on earth is about finding that flowing, appropriate, harmonious balance between the two energies. So it's only the ego, the human-centered mind, the inner child, that wants to kind of push us to extremes, that wants us to say, well, if I'm going to be spiritual, it's got to be all or nothing. I've got to get rid of my job. I've got to get rid of all my friends. I've got to restart my whole life. It's only the human-centered mind that looks at things in black and white. The Shen actually advocates this harmonious Wu Wei approach where we can sensitively find compromise in our daily life, whether that's how we earn money, how we relate to friends and family, what we do in our lifestyle, the choices we make.
And I use a word there that I often challenge with my clients. Alex used the word compromise. And personally, I don't like that word too much. I prefer the word cooperation, because compromise normally means you've got to give up something. And I'm not advocating you give up anything. I'm saying you find a way. You find a way, you find a cooperation in whatever you're doing. So, for instance, you may be right at the moment in a job that you don't like. You might be in a situation that you don't like. Here's your intention. Now you start planning your roadmap out of it. Now, that might be 6 months, a year, it might be 2 years. But I can tell you, once you start planning your roadmap out of your current situation, the energy changes in your life and in your thinking. And then the law of attraction starts to happen. It's amazing, the law of attraction. We've just been working with one of our clients that's stuck in a lifestyle that she doesn't like. She's come up now with an idea. Within a week, her new idea of making money is fully booked. Because once you're going around this carousel of despair, you attract more of the same. Remember, you're just attracting more in your life. So that's why I prefer the word cooperation, to cooperate with yourself. Sometimes we have to accept. We can't just change. We have mortgages to pay, bills to pay, children to feed. We can't just say, well, I've had enough, let me just change. But you can do that in your mind. You can say, this situation is not where I want to be. Now, where do I want to be? Now, here's your intention. Can I tell you what I normally hear when I do that with my clients? This is what they say. I don't know. And I go, what, you don't know what you want with your life? No. Well, I tell you what you want with your life is where you are now. This is what you have created. And if you want to change that, then you have to set a new intention. Because if you don't, you'll just keep on going around this hamster's wheel, this carousel, because you have to take, here's the clause, self-responsibility for where you are now before you can change. Because if you don't, it just becomes poor me. Nobody understands. I'll never change. My life will never move. I'm not saying it's going to change tomorrow, next week, next month. It might, as I said, might be 2 years, might be 3 years. I don't know. But once you set a new intention, a new roadmap, then the energy will start to change in your life.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. So I think really we've covered the essence of our message there. The Shen Contract clauses, having that clear intention we've spoken about, being truthful, honest, and having integrity for yourself, and taking that emotional self-responsibility for your life can infuse your daily life and lifestyle in so many ways. But as I say, we don't want to be prescriptive. It's not appropriate or spiritual to be prescriptive, because my journey is different from David's journey, is different from your journey. There is no set better or worse or more appropriate or less appropriate way to live a spiritual lifestyle. Be inspired by yourself and be inspired by nature. You and nature are your greatest teachers.
So the teaching is you are part of nature, not apart from it. Great teaching.
Brilliant. Thank you. So if you have any light bulb moments from this video, if you have any ideas of how you can apply any of the spiritual contract clauses into your life right now, please comment below and share. You know, we'd absolutely love to hear from you. If you want to work one-to-one with David on any of the topics we've talked about here or in any of our videos, David works with people all over the world by video call every week, and I will put a link in the video description below so you can learn more about that. We produce new videos on our channel every week, and we'd love to have you subscribe. So please don't forget to subscribe and press the bell notifications button so you get a little email notification every time we publish a new video. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Bye-bye.